Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Vargo here with Vargo Productions. Back again with another video, and today we're going to be going over a plugin that has gotten a lot of interest on my channel, at least, and that's the 1176 compressor. So if you're not familiar with the 1176, it's been around since like the early 70s. It's a pretty iconic compressor, and there are tons of emulators for this compressor, right? So, for example, I tend to use Waves plugins. So I have the CLA-76, but you can literally use any that you want. You know, you can use a free one. You can use one from Universal Audio or whatever you want to do. But the 1176 is a staple for me, at least, because it's incredibly versatile. You could use it on a ton of different instruments and drums and vocals and all of the above, right? So the defining feature of the 1176 is the incredibly fast attack and release time. Okay, so I think the slowest release time is about a millisecond. If you're looking to make a sound bouncy or just make it pop, then the 1176 is probably a good starting point for you. Looking at the interface here, the attack and release times are backward, right? So usually, if you wanted a faster attack, you would, bring this down to like 1. On the 1176, it's opposite. So the fastest attack is at 7. So I'm going to go ahead and play a beat. I've used the 1176 on a ton of different instruments here, and I'm just going to go over each one kind of individually to show you how I used it and how it affected the sound. Here's the beat that we're working with. All right, so let's start with the strings here. The strings are sort of the driving force throughout this beat. They're going to be playing throughout, and I wanted to make sure that they had presence and made sure that they pop. Otherwise, it's going to sound boring. Okay, so the 1176 is perfect for this. What I wanted is the initial transients to shine through, so the initial hit of the strings, but I wanted a really fast release because I wanted it to sound bouncy. If the release is too slow, it's just going to squish the whole thing. So I wanted a really quick release and a slower attack. Keep in mind the slower attack is still really fast, right? Because it's a millisecond is the slowest. So I'll go ahead and play it so you can see how much it's driving. And then I'll play before and after so you can kind of hear the difference. As you can see, it's reacting really quickly. And it's almost bouncing itself. And that's kind of what I wanted from the strings. So as you can see here, I've got a ton of effects on these strings. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to focus on the 76. Okay, so I'll go ahead and disable the plugin here. I'll let you hear it before and after, how much of a difference it makes. Kind of boring. I'll enable it. All right, so as you can see, the strings are a whole lot more bouncy with the 76 enabled. And that's what I wanted. I wanted those initial transients to shine through. I think that it came out well, and it just has more life. One thing I do want to explain real quick as we're moving on to the next instrument is the options that you see down here. The 76 has 2 versions as far as the hardware is concerned. They're nicknamed Bluey and Blackie. The Bluey is silver with the blue here. Blackie is this, of course. They sound different. I mean, they operate similarly, but they sound different, right? So in my opinion, The Blackie sounds more focused. That works for the sounds that I'm using it on. But the Bluey adds a lot of character to a sound, right? So it really colors the sound. A lot of people will use the Bluey on their vocals, but I tend to prefer the Blackie. So that's what this is down here. The ratio is pretty much like any other compressor, right? So the difference is it's backward, just like the attack and release, right? So generally speaking, with other compressors, a 20-to-1 ratio would be a whole lot, heavier than a 4-to-1. But with this plugin, it's backward. So 4 is the hardest compression here. 20 would be the lightest. But yeah, those are those options. Let's move on to the next sound. All right, so the next sound we're going to look at is going to be this little hi-hat loop that I'm using. So I have a couple of hi-hats already playing, but then I added this loop to give it a bit more character. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate those real quick so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. These are the initial hi-hats. Pretty simple, right? But then I added this loop in, which is the one we're going to be focusing on. So just a little ear candy that I'm throwing in there. As you can see, this is the only effect that I have on this sound so far. I do want to do more with it. I mean, I'm not done with this song, obviously. So this is what I've done so far, though. As far as these types of sounds are concerned, I tend to use it in a very similar way every time. So I'll tweak a few things here and there. But for the most part, I'm using it like this. Fast release, slower attack, and really driving it. I'll go ahead and play it before so you can kind of hear, and then I'll bring it in so you can hear the difference. Kind of sounds weak. Let's pump it up a bit. All right, so it makes a big difference. People will sometimes ask me, in a situation like that, they'll ask, why don't you just turn it up? Just bring the level up. And that's something that you could do. You can always make something louder, but that doesn't really accomplish what we're looking to accomplish, right? You hear the difference when the 76 comes in, the contact point of the hi-hat really shines through. The tick, tick, tick really comes through, and if you just turned it up, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. It would still sound kind of weak. So again, this is before. Sounds flat and kind of dull. And let's turn it up just to see the difference. It still sounds weak, right? All right, let's see what it sounds like with the compressor. Bring it in at the top. Again, it sounds more full, sounds heavier, it has more body. That's what this compressor does best, and that's what I'm using it for consistently throughout this beat because it needs it. All right, so the last sound I want to focus on here is a synth sound. And the reason I want to show you this one is that I'm using the 76 in a slightly different way, right? So, it would be pretty redundant for me to show you the same method, right? Although it does sort of show you the effects of the compressor, it's not really helpful for you. So what I did here, I'll go ahead and play the sound, and I'll show you why I used the Bluey and why I switched up some of the parameters here. But this is the sound before. This just plays with those other sounds, right? All right, so just some ear candy. I mean, that'll probably play in the hook. Ultimately, I didn't want this synth sound to sound like those others in that I didn't want it to sound incredibly bouncy. What I did was I sliced each note in half, so that's why you have the da-da, da-da, da-da rhythm. And because of that, I wanted to not necessarily squish the sound, but make it sound heavier, as if it's sort of like dragging along, like you're trying to, pull something through syrup. So to do that, I used the Bluey instead of the Blackie because of the color that it provides. It provides a lot more warmth than the Blackie does. In this one, I actually made the release almost as slow as it can get, and have the attack sort of in the middle, and that sort of accomplishes the goal. Let me go ahead and play it with the Bluey, and then I'll show you what it sounds like with the Blackie, and that'll sort of cover this sound as well. So this is before, and then I'll bring it in with the Bluey. I'll bring in the compressor. It almost sounds like it's struggling to even make the sound, right? And that's sort of what I was shooting for. But the difference is, let's look at the Blackie. I have to change the parameters a little bit for the Blackie. I gotta add a little bit more input. Under a similar setup with the Blackie, this is what it sounds like. It's just a bit more thin. And this type of sound that I'm shooting for is not really what the Blackie does best. So the Bluey was a good choice here, in my opinion. And I mean, this is just some of what the 76 can do, right? We didn't cover vocals. I will be making another video about that. If you're interested in learning more about the 1176, I actually have another video here on my channel that I'll link. And it basically covers a specific method called the 1176 to LA2A. And basically, it's using two compressors, starting with the 1176, ending with the LA2A, if you're familiar with that. It's one of the videos that's done fairly well so far on my channel, so feel free to check it out. Otherwise, I hope you guys learned something. I appreciate you stopping by, and I look forward to seeing the next one. All right, peace.